G'day, and thanks for stopping by at the eCave. In this episode, I'll continue my adventures with the 5161 IBM expansion unit. Sadly, in the last episode, I had to deviate from that, but we're back on track. So if you want to see what happens with the 5161, so why not join me in the eCave? Well, thanks for staying. As you can see here to my right, I've got the pieces which I have to assemble in order to get the 5161 back up and running. That will be my first cab off the rank, so to speak. So I'll assemble everything. I've got the cable here waiting to hook up with the 5150. And then we'll just have to see what happens. Now, I've been pondering about the hard drive, whether I should open it up and check if the heads are attached to the platter, but in reality, I don't think it would make a big difference. At the end of the day, it's a 40-year-old hard drive, and I'm certainly not expecting it to be working perfectly, but you never know. So with that, let's go and start assembling this thing together and take it from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the motherboard in, the power supply and the cards, and then I guess I'll plug in the hard drive. So let's get started. I've now put the 5161 together. The next step is to put the extender card into the 5150. This is a card that will allow us to hook the cable between the two units. However, before we put it in, there is a 4-switch block on the extender card that has to be configured. And it's based on the amount of memory that's located in the 5150. And I happen to have the manual here. So it says 608K to 640K because we have 640K in our 5150. So I've got to take switch 1 off, switch 2 on, switch 3 off, and switch 4 on. So we are now ready to put this card into the 5150 and hook up the cable and see what happens. Now, before I turn on the 5161, I've realized I haven't checked the tantalum capacitors on the cards. So what I'll do, I've disconnected the cable between the two, but I've got the extender card in the 5150 and I'll power it on and I'll see if it comes up or blows a tantalum. Okay, it is powering on. It's giving an 1801 error. Time to check the manual and see what's happening. Well, the 1801 error is because although I disconnected the cable between the two units, I still had the expander card in the 5150. So the onboard post routine detects that it has an expander card, but it can't talk to the expansion unit and generates an 1801 error. So that's easily explained. So I've hooked the cable back up, so the units are now both connected. So the rule of thumb is you have to power on the expansion unit first. I'm guessing there will be some noise from the hard drive, or at least there's supposed to be, so let's see. Well, the hard drive light is blinking. Next we power on the 5150. It is on now. So the 5150 is thinking about it. I wonder if it will boot into the compact flash card, the XT IDE. We'll see. What I'll do, I'll put the diskette, I've got the diagnostic diskette in there, and if it does bring up the XT IDE ROM, which I'm expecting, I'll have to press A to boot from the floppy. Come, you can do it. I guess back in the day you had to be very patient. We did see a 1701 error, which probably alludes to the fact that the hard drive's not happy. So let's see what the advanced diagnostics say. Now I'm not capturing this on my PC. You've probably seen these menus before. I'll move the camera a bit closer to the screen once we get the advanced diagnostic menu up. There we are. So let's move the camera so you can see what I see. It's picked up the expansion option. Is the list correct? Yes. Run test one time. Expansion option is 18, so we want to test that. We know the rest is pretty good. Let me see. It's seeing the fixed disk hard drive adapter and the asynchronous communication card, but let's try 18. Testing the expansion option. That ran fine. I'll do it again. And now we'll try 17, which is the hard drive. Run fixed disk test, yes. D. I'm assuming it's D. I don't know. Yes, they want to write to the disk. It's not happy. D. Yes. All right, it's not happy with that. We can do C. Yes. Wow, there's whinging about everything now. Looks like the hard drive is not responding in the expansion unit. But I think the async card might be worthwhile checking. I don't have the plugged. No, we don't have a cable attached. I don't have the right plug, so this will probably fail. Yeah. Well, the expansion unit is working, it's detected, and the communication between the 5150 and the receiver card is working. We do have a hard drive failure. Now, whether it's the card itself, the hard drive card, or the hard disk, I don't know. It might be worthwhile checking the connectors and any switches, because I don't know if you have to set a switch on the motherboard of the 5150. I don't think so. So let's have a think about this and then I'll be back. Well, as it turns out, when I sat down to do a bit more research, the issues I'm seeing are perfectly normal. What I had forgotten was the fact that when the IBM PC boots, it scans the ROM BIOS addresses, and when it finds a ROM BIOS, it initializes them. In the case of the IBM hard drive controller card, located in the expansion unit, it finds it first due to the fact that it has a lower BIOS ROM address than the XT IDE Compact Flash Light card. The IBM card has a BIOS ROM address of C800 and the XT IDE Compact Flash Light card was set to D000. So that is quite normal. The IBM hard disk controller card does not have any switches to set a different ROM address. It's simply hard-coded to C800. Now what that means is the IBM PC BIOS allocates the IBM hard disk controller card the drive letter C, and the XT IDE Compact Flash Light card gets the drive letter D. So as you saw previously, the IBM Advanced Diagnostic Program found the expansion unit with the IBM hard disk controller card along with the asynchronous card. When I tested the expansion unit option, which is given the designation 18, the test ran fine. However, this test only tests the communication between the extender card and the receiver card. When I chose the fixed disk drive and adapter with designation 17, I kept putting in drive letter D. I should have obviously put in drive letter C. D fails because it's trying to test the XT IDE Compact Flash Light card, which is of course fairly different to the IBM hard disk controller and the fixed disk. I eventually chose C, but that test failed as well. Once I got that into my head, I took a better look at the MiniScribe hard disk drive, and realized that the spindle motor wasn't turning, so it appeared to be dead despite the light blinking at the front. So how about we dig into that? So when I listened to the hard drive, I couldn't hear it spinning. So perhaps that's one of the problems with it. It can't spin the platter. So I've unscrewed a few hex screws, and I've taken the PCB, or loosened up the PCB so I can flip it over. And you can see the insides here. This is the motor that spins the platter. It seems to be, first when I moved it, it was a bit stuck, but it seems to have loosened slightly up. I have no idea whether it will continue to work after this, but strangely, I can feel some magnetic grip in it. So there's one, there's another one. In between is pretty free. I can't see the motor that moves the head. It must be inside because that is one of the connectors. Strangely, you can see there's a capacitor here. I'm guessing it's like a startup capacitor. And I think this is a relay, which probably starts the motor. Now, it's a bit dirty, so I'll clean that up. And there's another capacitor and a transistor. This looks like a bodge. It's difficult to say, but it probably was done later. I wonder if all the drives are like this, or this particular model. But anyway, I'll clean up the PCB a bit, and then we'll put it back together and see if it works. Well, I took out the PCB, as you see, and I was a bit suspicious of these capacitors. So I actually took it to the workbench, and I ended up replacing this one. This one seems to be okay, but I had to replace these 4 here. They were all pretty dried up. Like, for instance, they measure 100 microfarad, or sorry, they marked 100 microfarad, 25 volts, but they measured like 55 microfarad, which is half of the capacity there should be, plus the ESR was 0.7 instead of 0.2. So I put 100 microfarad in. And that applies to a few of them, the other as well. They look pretty dry. They weren't leaking. But will it have made any difference? A very good question. So all I can do is put this in and fire it up again and see what happens. Okay, I'm back again. I put it back together, and I'm going to power it on, and I'm going to see if I can. Hang on, something's turning now. That's like a 747 taking off. That's a good sign. The spindle motor is cranking. Will that make a difference when I power on? Let's find out. Well, I did stop there for a bit. The noise from the hard drive was just deafening. So I put the covers on both of the systems. There's no need to lose hearing over this. If you want to hear what it sounds like, I'll play back a recording I took on a microphone close to the drive. So if you want to listen to that, I'll do that here now. Well, that was a bit strange. It takes the spindle a while to run up to speed, but you can hear it varying speed until it sort of steadies. But anyway, another thing I realized was that the XT IDE card gives you the banner, but what you can do is, if you have two drives, instead of having it boot into C, which will fail because the MiniScribe drive here is the C drive, you just press the letter D on the keyboard and it will then boot from the XT IDE card into DOS, and that makes the XT IDE card the C drive and the MiniScribe drive becomes the D drive. Now I'll be capturing the output of the screen because I want to fire up the systems and boot into DOS and see if I can see what data is on the MiniScribe drive. So let's give that a go. First, the expansion unit has to be turned on. Yep, it's doing its dance. Next, the PC. And now we just have to wait, and I'll skip through all of this until we get the screen up. And as soon as I get the screen up, I'll throw it up here, and you will be able to see what I see on the PC and what I do. So I'm pressing D in order to boot into the XT IDE card. And as you see, if I do a directory, that's the XT IDE card. I'm running DOS version 3.3, and I'll do a directory on the MiniScribe drive. I'll probably have to blank out some of the information so as to not give away from where this PC expansion unit came from. So as you can see, there's some data there. However, let me clear this. See if I can run a check disk on it. Yeah. That's the problem I've seen. It simply doesn't work. Now, I do have SpinRite here. I don't know if SpinRite will do anything more. I've never run SpinRite before, so it's a first for me. I'll see what happens. Well, it's running through its routine and it couldn't create some data on the D drive. It was testing the memory. I can only hope that passes through. If it doesn't, SpinRite will exit and refuse to run, which means we're not going to be able to use it to do anything until I sort out the memory problem it seems to find, or may find. Yeah, I've run this once before, but I never got any further than this. I don't know if that will go any further than the last time, but anyway. Oh, it's passed all its initialization routines, so let's point it at the D drive and see what it says. SpinRite is about to begin operation at level 4, locate surface defects. Well, we'll start. I want to do a fingerprinting on drive C, which is the XTE IDE card. It does a lot of preparation, this program. Well, we don't need to benchmark it. Seems to be scanning through drive C at level 4, which is the XTE IDE card. And you shouldn't find anything untoward. I must admit that I've never used SpinRite before, so I'm struggling here, as you see. I began with SpinRite version 5, and as I mentioned, it always failed the memory test and bombed out. This is version 4, and surprisingly it got past the memory test, but then wanted to analyze the XT IDE card first, which of course took a fair bit of time. Once it completed that, it finally proceeded to the second hard drive, which is our MiniScribe drive in the expansion unit. And as you probably see shortly, this is where it also constantly failed or hung on an entry called BIOS entry segment. I tried this a few times, but it would always simply hang on this entry and basically freeze the PC. I had to power off and on again in order to start the PC up again. All of this takes a lot of time, for sure. In the end, I gave up on SpinRite and decided to use DOS check disk in repair mode. As you can see, check disk in repair mode was also having lots of problems. I did fix up a few things, but couldn't fix up all the mess. I opted to use retry or fail in order to get check disk to proceed, and then in the end it did finish. Doing a directory only showed hundreds of files 0xxx, which are recovery files. But even then, when I tried to copy some of these files off the drive, i.e. from the D drive to the C drive, it failed every time. So it was impossible to get anything off the drive, although you could view the directory. I then tried SpinRite version 4 against the D drive, but it always failed at the same entry as before, so that was a no-go. I then realized that I spent a lot of time trying to get some data off this drive without success. Not that the data itself mattered, I was just hopeful in seeing the drive operational. So I decided to boot into the IBM Advanced Diagnostic Program and format the drive as a last resort. This format is a low-level format, which of course lays down new tracks and sectors. All the data is wiped out. Initially, I thought that it hadn't gone well, but it did complete in the end. Once booted back into DOS, I used fdisk to create a new partition on the D drive. You have to use option 5 to choose the second drive because, once again, the XT IDE card is the first drive. Now, as you see, there is no partition on the D drive after the low-level format. After the reboot, I used fdisk again to double check that the partition was okay on the D drive, and thankfully it was present and set as a primary DOS partition. Then it was only a matter of formatting the D drive and transfer the DOS file systems as you see here. Surprisingly, it ended to be successful, although, as you see, it has some bad sectors. And the last thing I did was to copy all the files off the XTE IDE card, which is the C drive, onto the D drive. And it worked. With all of this done, I lastly wanted to see if the IBM PC could boot from the hard drive in the expansion unit. I do apologize for the noisy sound, but I can only blame it on the MiniScribe hard drive, which is still whinging about having been woken up from retirement. Well, this has been an interesting journey. The 5150 finally booted off the MiniScribe hard drive in the expansion unit, and it works like a charm. I even ran SpinRite again, and this time I stuck to version 4. And it got past everything and scanned the hard drive. So I don't know why it would fail on that BIOS entry segment before, but who knows? At least it's working now. However, the MiniScribe is whinging. It certainly doesn't like having been woken up. So the noise is just too loud and will drive you crazy. So it's not something you would definitely want to work at, because the noise is far higher than the normal MiniScribe hard drive noise. Now, as you saw, I was struggling with SpinRite, and SpinRite couldn't access the MiniScribe while it was faulty and having problems. I'm just wondering if I have to use some other tools in order to get the data off disks that are damaged like that. But if you know any better, by all means let me know. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why does he have a brick there? Well, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but MiniScribe Corporation, which was founded and operated in the USA, towards the latter half of the 80s, they got into trouble with their inventory. What that ended up doing was that the management hid the fact that they didn't have the inventory they claimed to have. And one year they were afraid that the auditors would find out. So in order to mitigate that, they rented a warehouse in Colorado and filled 26,000 packages supposedly containing hard drives with serial numbers and everything with a brick, because they didn't have the hard drives they claimed to have on stock. That way they could fool the auditors. Now, there's a documentary and a Wikipedia on this, which is quite interesting. Corporate fraud at its best. But I was curious, you know. They said they used the brick because the brick weighs about the same thing as the MiniScribe hard drive. So I actually took the MiniScribe hard drive I have, put it on a scale, and guess what? It weighs exactly the same as a brick. I'll show you the photos, but 2.5 kilos approximately. There's a 10-gram difference. Now, whether this MiniScribe is the same as the one they were hiding, I don't know, but it's funny. So if you're interested in that documentary or the Wikipedia article, I'll put a link to that down below. Now, what will I do with this unit? Well, I'm just happy it's functioning, and I know it's been restored, and I can always put in an XT IDE controller card and put an IDE drive in there if I want to. But that's something I might look at in the future. I've got yet another 5150 to restore. I've got a couple of XTs and 2 or 3 ATs. And as you probably see around me here, back there, a number of PS2s. I think one of the things I'm going to have to do is to tackle the PS2s, not necessarily every individual one, but the diskette drives in them, because they have leaky capacitors, and in order to not have the PCBs completely destroyed in the diskette drives, I'll probably have to start looking at that. I'll probably do an episode on that. But anyway, thanks for joining me in the eCave. I hope you learned something. I'm always learning something and having fun at the same time. So, goodbye for now.